I never thought I'd be the kind of father who'd make enemies at a wedding shower. At 63, I'd learned to pick my battles carefully. But when someone comes after your daughter, all that wisdom goes out the window. My daughter Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening in March. I was in my workshop, refinishing an old dresser I'd picked up at an estate sale. That's what I do, now that I'm retired from the postal service. Restore furniture. Keep my hands busy. Try not to drive my wife Margaret crazy with my projects. Dad, I need to tell you something, Sarah said, and I could hear that tremor in her voice that I hadn't heard since she was 16 and backed my truck into a fence post. What's wrong, sweetheart? Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's really right, David proposed. I set down my sandpaper. David Chen. I'd met him exactly twice, once at Christmas dinner, once at Sarah's birthday in January. 31 years old, worked in commercial real estate, seemed like a decent enough guy, quiet, polite, shook my hand firmly both times. That's wonderful news, I said, and I meant it. Sarah was 29, had been through a rough breakup 3 years ago, with a guy who thought commitment meant showing up to her apartment when he felt like it. She deserved someone solid. We're having an engagement shower next month, Sarah continued. At David's parents' house. They insisted on hosting. Dad, I need you to promise me something. What's that? Just be yourself. Don't try too hard. I frowned at the dresser in front of me. When have I ever tried too hard? You know what I mean. David's family they're different from us. His dad owns a chain of luxury car dealerships. Their house is in Rosedale. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Sarah, I delivered mail to half the houses in this city for 35 years. I've seen the inside of mansions and basement apartments. People are people. I know, Dad. I just wanted to give you a heads up. After we hung up, Margaret came into the workshop. She'd been listening from the doorway, the way she does. You heard? I asked. She's worried about you meeting the Chens properly, Margaret said. She sat on my workbench stool, careful not to get sawdust on her cardigan. The father especially. What do you know about him? Linda Chen. I looked her up after Christmas. She sits on 3 charitable boards. He's Victor Chen. There was an article about him in Toronto Life last year. Very successful. Very proud of it. And you think that's going to be a problem? Margaret gave me that look. The one that says she's seen this movie before and knows how it ends. I think you should wear the navy suit. And maybe let me pick your tie. The engagement shower was on a Sunday in April. The Chen's house in Rosedale was exactly what I expected. 3 stories of red brick, circular driveway, gardens that probably required a full-time staff. There were maybe 40 people there when Margaret and I arrived. We weren't late, but we weren't early either. Linda Chen met us at the door. She was elegant in that effortless way some women have, wearing cream-colored linen that probably cost more than my truck payment. You must be Sarah's parents, she said warmly. I'm so glad you could make it. Please, come in. Victor's in the living room. The living room was the size of our main floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that looked like museum pieces, and a bar cart that held bottles I recognized from duty-free catalogs. Victor Chen stood by the fireplace, talking to a man in a golf shirt. When he saw us, he excused himself and walked over. He was shorter than I expected, maybe 5'8", but he carried himself like he owned every room he entered. Perfectly tailored charcoal slacks, crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up just so. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Robert, he said, wonderful to finally meet you properly. Sarah speaks very highly of you. Likewise, I said. You have a beautiful home. Thank you. We've been here 15 years now. Still finding things to renovate. He gestured to the room. Can I get you a drink? We have a wonderful single malt I just brought back from Scotland. Or if you prefer wine, I have a Bordeaux that's quite exceptional. Just water would be fine, I said. Something flickered across his face. Surprise. Maybe disappointment. Of course. Linda, could you show Robert and Margaret where the refreshments are? I need to check on something in the kitchen. He walked away before I could respond. Margaret squeezed my arm. That went well, she said quietly. Did it? We made our way through the crowd. I recognized Sarah immediately, standing near the windows with David. She looked radiant in a blue dress, laughing at something someone said. When she saw me, her whole face lit up. Dad! Mom! She rushed over, hugged us both. I'm so glad you're here. Come meet everyone. The next hour was a blur of introductions. David's colleagues from work, Linda's friends from the hospital foundation, relatives from both sides. Everyone was polite. Everyone asked what I did, and when I said I was retired from Canada Post, there was always that slight pause, that recalibration of expectations. How wonderful, they'd say. That must have been so. Steady? At one point, I found myself standing near the bar cart with one of David's uncles, a man named James, who owned a tech consulting firm. "So, you were a mailman," James said. He wasn't being rude, exactly, just matter of fact. "Letter carrier," I corrected. 35 years. That's dedication. My wife keeps saying we should do something with service, volunteering, that sort of thing. But you know how it is. Never enough hours in the day. I nodded, sipped my water. "David mentioned you do furniture restoration now," James continued. "Hobby, mostly. Keeps me busy." "That's nice. Good to have hobbies." "Victor golfs." "I golf." "Do you golf?" "Not really my thing." "Ah." Another pause. "Well, it's never too late to start." Before I could respond, Victor's voice rose above the crowd. He was standing in front of the fireplace, tapping a fork against his champagne glass. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for just a moment." The room quieted. Sarah and David moved to stand beside Victor. Linda joined them, beaming. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate David and Sarah's engagement," Victor began. "As a father, there's nothing more important than seeing your son happy. And David, I can see that Sarah makes you very happy." There was a murmur of agreement, some light applause. When David first told me about Sarah, I'll admit I was curious. My son has always had excellent judgment, so I knew she must be special. And she is. She's kind. She's intelligent. She has a promising career in graphic design. I felt Margaret tense beside me. Victor continued, his tone still warm but something sharp underneath. "Now, I come from a family of modest means. My father worked in a restaurant. My mother cleaned houses. I know what it's like to work your way up. I built my first dealership from nothing. And I've tried to instill those same values in David. The importance of ambition, of excellence, of always striving for more." He turned to Sarah, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sarah, I know you're learning to navigate a different world than the one you grew up in. You're learning about wine, about art, about the social expectations that come with being part of a family like ours. And I want you to know that's wonderful. You're making an effort, and that's all anyone can ask." Sarah's smile had frozen on her face. "But I also want to be honest," Victor said, his voice taking on that tone wealthy men use when they're about to say something cruel and call it truth. "There's still work to be done. Being part of this family means understanding certain standards, certain expectations. I hope you understand what you're marrying into, Sarah, and I hope you're ready for it." The room had gone completely silent. Even the servers had stopped moving. Victor raised his glass. "To David and Sarah, may their future be as bright as their potential." People drank, some uncertainly, some enthusiastically. Sarah's face had gone pale. David looked like he'd been punched. He opened his mouth to say something, but Victor had already turned away to talk to someone else, as if his toast had been perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable. I felt my hands grip the water glass I was holding. The ice clinked against the sides. Margaret touched my arm. "Robert." "I know," I said quietly. Sarah caught my eye across the room. She shook her head slightly, a tiny movement. "Don't. Please don't." I watched Victor move through the crowd, accepting congratulations on his toast, his words. Watched him clap another man on the shoulder, laugh at a joke, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just humiliated my daughter in front of 40 people. Or maybe he wasn't oblivious. Maybe that was exactly what he'd intended. I set down my glass and walked outside to the garden. I needed air. I needed to not be in that room with that man and his poisonous words dressed up as wisdom. The garden was beautiful rose bushes, a koi pond, stone pathways. The kind of place that required money and staff and time. I found a bench near the pond and sat down. I thought about Sarah at 16, when that boy told her she was too clingy and she cried in my truck. I thought about Sarah at 22, graduating from OCAD with honors, showing me her portfolio with such pride. I thought about Sarah at 26, picking herself up after that last relationship ended, refusing to be broken by it. My daughter didn't need to learn about wine or art or social graces. She'd been raised with integrity and kindness and strength. She knew how to work hard, how to stand up for herself, how to love without reservation. But she'd just stood there and smiled while a man implied she wasn't good enough for his son. And David, with his commercial real estate job and his Rosedale address, had stood there and let it happen. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then I made a call. "Mitchell, it's Robert Harper. I need a favor." Mitchell Davies had been my route supervisor for 20 years before I retired. He'd moved on to manage logistics for the entire Toronto Central District. More importantly, he had a brother who worked in corporate investigations. "What kind of favor?" Mitchell asked. "The kind where you ask your brother to look into someone." Discreetly, there was a pause. "Robert, what's going on?" "Someone insulted my daughter. I want to know if he's as perfect as he thinks he is." "Who?" "Victor Chen. Owns Prestige Auto Group. Multiple dealerships." Mitchell whistled softly. "That's not a small fish. I don't care how big the fish is. I just want to know if it's clean. Give me a couple days." I hung up and sat there for another 10 minutes, watching the koi swim in lazy circles. Then Margaret came out. "Everyone's asking where you went," she said. "Let them ask." She sat beside me. We'd been married for 37 years. She knew when to push and when to sit quietly. "I'm going to find out who he really is," I said finally. "And if there's something there, something he's hiding, I'm going to make sure it comes to light. And if there's nothing, then at least I'll know I tried." Margaret took my hand. "She wouldn't want you to do this. She shouldn't have to want it. She should have a father who stands up for her when someone treats her like she's not good enough." I looked at my wife. "Did you hear what he said? There's still work to be done. Like she's a project. Like she's broken." "I heard it. And you don't think I should do anything?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "I didn't say that. I said she wouldn't want you to, but sometimes we do things for our children that they don't want us to do because we're their parents and we know better." She squeezed my hand. "Just be careful." We went back inside. I avoided Victor for the rest of the afternoon, made small talk with people whose names I forgot immediately, and watched my daughter try to pretend everything was fine. When we left, Sarah walked us to the car. "Dad, about what Victor said." "We don't need to talk about it," I said. "He didn't mean it the way it sounded. He just has high standards. He wants the best for David. And you're not the best? That's not what I'm saying. This is important to me. This relationship. I love David. I can handle his father." I hugged her. "I know you can, sweetheart. I know you can." But as we drove home, I thought about all the women I'd known in my life who'd had to handle difficult men. My mother, handling my grandfather's temper. Margaret's sister, handling her husband's drinking. All these strong women, handling things they shouldn't have to handle. Maybe it was time someone else did the handling. Mitchell called me on Wednesday. "My brother made some calls," he said. "Nothing official, just preliminary stuff. But Robert, you might want to hear this." "I'm listening." Prestige Auto Group filed for bankruptcy protection 3 times between 2008 and 2015. Each time, they restructured, brought in new investors, stayed afloat. Nothing illegal about that. But the way they did it was interesting. There are rumors, and I stress, these are just rumors, that they inflated inventory values to secure larger loans, then used those loans to cover operational costs instead of actual inventory purchases. That sounds illegal. If it's true, yes. It's a form of loan fraud, but proving it would require access to internal documents, audit records, things like that. How would someone get access to those? Mitchell hesitated. "Robert, what exactly are you planning?" "I don't know yet." "Keep going. What else?" In 2017, there was a lawsuit filed by a former business partner, guy named Thomas Brennan. He claimed Victor and his brother Edward defrauded him out of his share of a dealership they opened in Mississauga. Case was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. "Settlements like that usually include non-disclosure agreements," I said. "Usually. But sometimes people talk anyway, if you know how to ask." "You think this Brennan would talk?" "My brother thinks he might. Apparently the settlement wasn't as generous as Brennan wanted. He's still bitter about it." I wrote down the name. "Anything else?" "One more thing. The current CFO of Prestige Auto Group is a guy named Marcus Wu. He's been with the company for 6 years. Before that, he worked at a firm that got shut down by the Ontario Securities Commission for fraudulent accounting practices. He wasn't charged personally, but he was named in the investigation report. So Victor hired someone with a questionable past to manage his finances. Could be legitimate. People deserve second chances. Or it could be that Victor wanted someone who knew how to make numbers look good on paper, regardless of what they actually represented. I thanked Mitchell and hung up. Then I sat in my workshop, staring at the notes I'd taken. I'm not a detective. I'm not an investigator. I'm a retired postal worker who refinishes furniture. But I spent 35 years walking the same routes, talking to the same people, learning how to read situations and put pieces together. And I knew that where there's smoke, there's usually fire. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something I hadn't done since I retired. I investigated. I found Thomas Brennan through LinkedIn. He owned a small used car lot in Burlington now. I drove out on a Saturday morning, pretended I was interested in a 2015 Honda Accord, and eventually steered the conversation to his previous work. Used to be in business with a guy named Victor Chen, Brennan said as we sat in his office. He was in his 50s, heavy set, wearing a golf shirt with his dealership logo. Biggest mistake of my life. What happened? Brennan studied me. You're not really here about the Accord, are you? My daughter's marrying Victor's son. I'm trying to figure out what kind of family she's marrying into. Something in Brennan's expression shifted. Your daughter? Jesus. I'm sorry. That bad? Victor Chen is one of the most ruthless people I've ever met. We were partners, equal partners on a dealership in Mississauga. I put in $300,000 of my own money. We were supposed to split everything 50-50, but that's not what happened. 2 years in, Victor tells me we need to restructure. Says the dealership isn't performing as well as projected. Shows me all these accounting reports, financial statements. I'm not an accountant. I trusted him. I signed papers. Turns out those papers transferred my shares to him for a fraction of what they were worth. And when you found out? I sued. Spent 2 years and $100,000 in legal fees. Finally settled for a quarter of what I was owed, plus a gag order. But gag orders only matter if you have something left to lose. He leaned back in his chair. Your daughter should know what she's getting into. Do you have any proof? Documentation? I kept copies of everything. Against the NDA, technically. But I don't care anymore. If it helps your daughter, you can have it. He printed out a stack of documents, emails, contracts, financial statements. I thanked him and drove home with a cardboard box full of evidence sitting in my passenger seat. That evening, I spread everything out on my workshop table. Margaret brought me coffee and looked at the papers. This is serious, Robert. I know. If this goes public, it could destroy Victor's business. David works for that business. This could hurt Sarah and David both. I'd thought about that. Thought about it a lot. What's worse, letting her marry into a family built on fraud or showing her the truth before it's too late? Maybe that should be her choice. She doesn't know there's a choice to make. She thinks Victor's just difficult. She doesn't know he's a criminal. Margaret sighed. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to an old friend. The old friend was Patricia Montgomery. I delivered to her house for 15 years, a lawyer who'd eventually made partner at a downtown firm specializing in corporate fraud. We'd become friends over the years, the way you do when you see someone almost every day. She'd come to my retirement party. I met her for coffee at a Tim Hortons near her office. Robert Harper, she said warmly, hugging me. It's been too long. How's retirement treating you? Good. Busy. Patricia, I need legal advice. Her expression turned serious. What kind? I told her everything. About Sarah's engagement, about Victor's toast, about what I'd found. I showed her Brennan's documents. She read through them carefully, making notes. Finally, she looked up. This is potentially explosive. If these allegations are true, Victor Chen has been committing loan fraud for over a decade. The statute of limitations varies depending on the specific offenses. But some of this could still be prosecutable. What would it take to prove it? An official investigation. The police, probably the fraud division. They'd need to subpoena internal records, interview employees, build a case. But to start that investigation, someone would need to file a formal complaint with enough evidence to warrant looking into it. Like this? I gestured to the documents. This would be a good start. But Robert, you need to understand if you do this, it won't be quiet. Once an investigation starts, it becomes public record. Reporters will pick it up. Victor's business will be scrutinized, and your daughter will be in the middle of it. What's the alternative? Let her marry into this family without knowing the truth? Patricia chose her words carefully. The alternative is to give her the information and let her decide what to do with it. Show her what you've found, explain what it means, but let it be her choice whether to pursue it. I thought she might choose to ignore it, and I wasn't sure I could live with that. That night, I lay awake beside Margaret, staring at the ceiling. "You're still awake," Margaret said quietly. "Can't sleep. You're going to do it anyway, even if Sarah doesn't want you to." "How do you know?" "Because I know you. When you decide something's right, you don't back down. It's one of the things I love about you. It's also one of the things that drives me crazy." I turned to look at her. "What would you do?" "I'd probably do the same thing, but I'd feel terrible about it afterward. That makes two of us." On Monday morning, I drove to the Toronto Police Service Fraud Division and asked to speak to a detective. I brought the box of documents. I explained the situation. The detective, a woman named Detective Sarah Chen, which felt like some kind of cosmic joke, listened carefully and took notes. "This will take time to investigate," she said. "Weeks, maybe months. We'll need to verify everything, build a case. If charges are filed, it'll become public record." "I understand. Can I ask why you're doing this? You could have just warned your daughter privately." I thought about that toast, about Victor's smile as he implied my daughter wasn't good enough, about all the people over the years who'd looked at me and seen just a mailman, nothing more. "Because men like Victor Chen think they're untouchable," I said. "They think they can say whatever they want, do whatever they want, and there won't be consequences. I want him to know he's wrong." Detective Chen nodded. "I'll be in touch." I didn't tell Sarah, didn't tell David. For 6 weeks, life went on normally. Sarah sent me pictures of wedding venues, asked my opinion on flowers, talked excitedly about her dress fitting. David was polite when I saw him, distant but polite. I wondered if Victor had said something to him about me. Then, on a Tuesday in June, the news broke. I was in my workshop when my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Dad, what did you do?" Her voice was shaking. I could hear crying in the background. "Sarah, it's all over the news. Victor Chen, investigation for fraud, Prestige Auto Group." "Dad, what did you do?" "I filed a complaint with the police. I gave them evidence that Victor's been committing loan fraud for years." "Without talking to me? Without asking me? Would you have wanted me to?" Silence. Then, "That's not the point. This is my life, Dad. My relationship. And you just, I couldn't watch you marry into that family without knowing the truth." "The truth?" "The truth is that you embarrassed me. You embarrassed David. His father might go to jail, and everyone's going to think I knew. That my family—" "Sarah, listen to me." "No, I can't talk to you right now." She hung up. Margaret found me an hour later, still sitting in the workshop, phone in my hand. "She called," I said. "I know. She called me too." "What did she say?" "That she needs time. That she's angry. That she doesn't know if she can forgive you." I felt something crack in my chest. "I did the right thing. I know you did. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." The investigation moved quickly once it started. Victor was arrested within a week. The charges included loan fraud, falsification of business records, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Marcus Wu was also arrested. David issued a statement saying he had no knowledge of his father's activities and was cooperating fully with investigators. Sarah didn't call, didn't answer my calls, didn't respond to my texts. I watched the news coverage, read the articles, saw Victor's mugshot, saw interviews with former employees, with other business partners who came forward with similar stories, saw Prestige Auto Group stock plummet, and I wondered if I'd made the right choice. 3 months later, I got a text from Sarah. "Can we talk?" We met at a coffee shop in the Beaches. Neutral territory. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered. We sat down with our coffees, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "David and I postponed the wedding," she said finally. "I'm sorry. We're going to couples counseling, trying to figure out if we can get through this." "How is he?" "Angry, hurt, betrayed. His whole life was a lie, and he didn't know it. His father's legacy is fraud and lies." She looked at me. "Because of you, his father's legacy is fraud and lies because of his father. I just brought it to light. You could have told me, given me the choice. Would you have done anything with that information?" She was quiet. "I don't know. Maybe not. I would have wanted to protect David, to protect what we had. Even if what you had was built on lies? Not our lies. His father's lies. We didn't do anything wrong. No, but you would have been part of that family, connected to it. And someday, maybe you'd have children, and they'd be connected to it too. I couldn't let that happen without you knowing the truth. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I know you thought you were protecting me. I know that. But Dad, you broke my trust. You made a decision about my life without including me, and I don't know how to get past that. I understand. Do you? Because I don't think you do. I'm 29 years old. I'm not a child. I don't need you to fight my battles anymore. This wasn't about fighting your battles. This was about standing up when someone treated you as less than you are. When Victor gave that toast, implying you weren't good enough, that you needed to improve to meet his standards, I couldn't let that stand. Not without doing something. So you destroyed his life. I exposed his crimes. There's a difference. We sat in silence, drinking our coffee. Finally, Sarah said, the counselor asked me something. She asked if I thought you did it out of love or out of ego. What did you say? I said both. I think you love me, and I think you were also angry that someone disrespected you by disrespecting me. I think you wanted to prove that you weren't just some retired mailman who could be dismissed. She wasn't wrong. I'd thought about that too, in the long nights since Sarah stopped talking to me. Maybe that's true, I admitted. Maybe I did want to prove something. But Sarah, if I had it to do over again, I'd do the same thing. Because at the end of the day, I'd rather have you angry at me and safe than have you thank me while walking into a mess I could have prevented. Sarah wiped her eyes. David's father goes to trial in January. His lawyers think he'll get 8 to 10 years if he's convicted. How does David feel about that? He visits his father every week, brings him books. They don't talk about the charges, just books, hockey, normal things. She looked at me. He's a good man, Dad. Despite everything, he's a good man. I never doubted that. His father being terrible doesn't make him terrible. I know. But it also doesn't mean your father being protective makes him right. I nodded. I know that too. We talked for another hour. It wasn't a reconciliation, exactly. More like a ceasefire, an acknowledgement that we both had valid points, even if we disagreed on the execution. As we stood to leave, Sarah hugged me. I'm still angry. I know, but I also know you did it because you love me. I do, more than anything. Next time, trust me to handle my own life. I'll try. Victor Chen was convicted on 14 counts of fraud and sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. Marcus Wu received 7 years. The Prestige Auto Group filed for bankruptcy and was liquidated. David took a job at a different firm, started rebuilding his career away from his father's shadow. Sarah and David got married 2 years later. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, at a vineyard in Niagara. David's mother was there. Victor wasn't. During the reception, David pulled me aside. I need to thank you, he said. For what? For being brave enough to do what nobody else would do. My father hurt a lot of people. If you hadn't come forward, he would have kept hurting people. Including Sarah. Including me. I didn't do it to hurt you. I know. You did it to protect your daughter. I understand that now. And someday, when I have children, I hope I have the courage to protect them the way you protected Sarah. I shook his hand. You're a good man, David. I'm trying to be. Now, at 65, I think about that day a lot. About the choices we make as parents. About when to step in and when to step back. I think about integrity and what it means to stand up for the people we love. I learned something important through all of this. Standing up for what's right isn't always clean or easy. Sometimes it means making choices that hurt the people you're trying to protect. Sometimes it means sacrificing your relationship with your child to save them from something worse. But I also learned that trust is fragile, that our children grow up and have to make their own decisions, even when we can see disasters ahead of them. That part of loving someone is giving them the space to make mistakes, even when it tears you apart to watch. Sarah and I are close again now. Not the same as before, there's a small scar there, a reminder of what happened. But we talk every week. She asks my advice sometimes, and when she does, I try to remember that advice isn't the same as action, that she's capable of making her own choices. If I could go back, would I do it differently? I don't know. Maybe I would have tried harder to convince Sarah to look at the evidence herself. Maybe I would have given her more time to process before going to the police. Or maybe I would have done exactly the same thing, because at the end of the day, I'm her father. And sometimes being a father means making the hard choices, even when nobody thanks you for it. What I do know is this: we teach our children about integrity by showing them what it looks like in action. We teach them about courage by being willing to stand alone when necessary. We teach them about love by protecting them, even when that protection comes at a personal cost. Victor Chen thought he could treat my daughter as less than she was because of where she came from, because of who her father was. He thought a retired postal worker couldn't touch him, couldn't hurt him, couldn't bring down his empire of lies. He was wrong. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all, that dignity isn't about wealth or status or social position. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. It's about standing up, even when you're afraid, even when it costs you something. I hope Sarah remembers that. I hope that when her children ask her about their grandfather someday, she tells them I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes. But I loved her enough to fight for her, even when she didn't want me to. That's all any of us can do: love our families fiercely, act with integrity, and hope that in the end, it's enough.